the nations of the world pledge to uphold peace, development, and human rights, which would be underpinned by international law. Now more than ever, we are called upon to uphold the values and advance the purpose of the United Nations. We are also called upon to advance cooperation and solidarity between nations. We are called upon to promote multilateralism and safeguard the institutions that enable it. South Africa's engagement in the international sphere echoes our domestic imperatives of eradicating poverty, reducing unemployment, and addressing the root causes of inequality. Our foreign policy is guided not only by the needs of our people, but also those of the continent of Africa and the Global South. Inspired by our own history, South Africa strives to maintain world peace and also the settlement of all international disputes through negotiation and dialogue and not through war. We therefore welcome the strong partnership between the African Union and the United Nations in promoting peace, security, and stability on the African continent. This year, South Africa is honored to preside over the G20. This is the first time that G20 Leaders Summit will be held on the African continent, the cradle of humanity. South Africa's G20 presidency is guided by the theme, equality, solidarity, and sustainability. To give full meaning to our theme of equality, solidarity, and sustainability, we have invited the G20 countries to join us in prioritizing the following areas. Firstly, in discussion to strengthen disaster resilience and response by addressing the increasing frequency and impact of climate-induced natural disasters. Secondly, to ensure that we have debt sustainability for low-income countries by crafting innovative ways to support countries to have low levels of debt to maintain economic stability. Thirdly, to discuss how to mobilize finance for a just energy transition by encouraging investments in renewable energy and sustainable technologies, without foregoing what we would call baseload energy sources. Fourthly, by harnessing critical minerals for inclusive growth and sustainable development through the value addition processes, that is, beneficiation of these minerals at the source where the minerals are extracted, to foster the development of communities where these minerals are found. These priorities reflect South Africa's commitment to addressing global challenges and promoting inclusive growth and sustainable development. Our country's G20 presidency is a significant opportunity for South Africa to advocate for Africa's development agenda and to amplify African voices in global economic governance for a continent that is irreversibly on the rise. As member states of the United Nations, we have all adopted the Sustainable Development Goals. However, many of these goals remain elusive. There are many reasons that hold many countries back from fulfilling and implementing these development goals. Some of these reasons are lack of sufficient financial resources that can finance the advance that these countries need to make to fulfill those goals. Many countries with developing economies, especially in Africa and the Global South, do not have adequate capital to finance their development goals. They are indebted and are paying much more on debt servicing than they do on health and education. In fact, these countries pay much more than countries in the North for their debt. Yet through global solidarity, by having fairer lending rules, especially for several of the Global South countries, we can achieve our shared commitment. Through trade. Trade is one of the most important instruments to mobilize domestic resources for development. It is concerning that geopolitical shocks and unprecedented trade policy volatility are destabilizing the global economy and jeopardizing a critical source of development finance. In fact, the economy and jeopardizing a critical source of development finance. In fact, trade is now being used as a weapon against a number of countries in the world. We must redouble our efforts to strengthen the link between trade and development. Unilateral trade practices and economic cohesion have a detrimental impact on many nations. This includes the economic embargo against Cuba, which has caused untold damage to the country's economy over the years. This unfair embargo must be lifted, and we want it lifted sooner rather than later. In the midst of global trade uncertainty, the African continent is providing a pragmatic example of constructive collaboration and cooperation by using the African Continental Free Trade Area as an engine for sustainable growth and development. This will, with commitment, become the central pillar of economic cooperation and integration for our continent. As part of the effort to build more inclusive economies, South Africa's G20 presidency has launched an extraordinary committee of independent experts on global wealth inequality. This committee, chaired by Professor Joseph Stiglitz, a Nobel laureate, will deliver the first ever report on global inequality to G20 leaders when they meet in November in Johannesburg in South Africa. Climate change is an existential threat. We are failing future generations by our inability to reduce global warming. Climate change is reversing economic growth and development gains in many countries, especially in the Global South. Although Africa carries the least responsibility for climate change, many countries on the continent of Africa experience much of its harshest effects. Extreme weather events like floods and droughts are driving food insecurity, displacing populations, causing damage to infrastructure, and leading to the unnecessary loss of livelihoods. Member states must honor their undertakings and commitments in line with the guiding principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. The Secretary General recently reported that global military expenditure has reached historic highs, just as the world is falling behind on its core development promises. We are building weapons when we should be building social infrastructure that advance the lives of our people. We are fighting wars that cause death and destruction when we should be fighting poverty and developing the livelihoods of vulnerable people. We must act decisively to silence all the guns everywhere to realize the goal of sustainable development and global peace. And I do believe that this is an objective that is possible to reach. As we commemorate the 80th anniversary of the UN, the relevance of this institution and various multilateral processes for the maintenance of international peace and security is being willfully undermined. There is an increasing reliance on unilateral military action in contravention of international law. The United Nations Security Council has proven to be ineffective in its current form and composition in carrying out its charter mandate to maintain international peace and security. South Africa remains deeply concerned by the erosion of the credibility of the Security Council and its failures to ensure accountability and uphold international law. As the security and humanitarian situations in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Sudan, Gaza, and elsewhere deteriorate, it is a matter of great concern that there are countries that continue to violate international law and also defy the United Nations resolutions and rulings, also from bodies like the International Court of Justice. The establishment of the Hague Group and the Madrid Group aim to reaffirm the primacy of international law, promoting accountability and ensuring support for a just peace. We cannot and should not accept that members of this organization continue willfully to violate without consequence the charter that we have all agreed to uphold. Therefore, as nations that have pledged to uphold the UN Charter, we have the ultimate responsibility to ensure and protect the rights of the Palestinian people to self-determination, consistent with the case that South Africa brought before the International Court of Justice. There is growing global consensus. There is growing global consensus that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. Just last week, the United Nations Independent International Commission of Inquiry found that Israel is responsible for the commission of genocide in Gaza. As Palestinians continue to face genocide and famine, we have a duty to act. South Africa has acted in the interest of saving lives by insisting that the International Court of Justice should make a ruling that indeed genocide is being committed in Gaza and that it should stop. And we stand here to say it must stop. We welcome the historic high-level meeting held yesterday on the two-state solution yesterday in this very chamber. This reflects the determination of the global majority, a global majority that now stands at 142 and more countries, that Palestinians deserve a peaceful state alongside a peaceful Israel. Many nations in the world are calling for that, and that is the voice that we believe that Israel should heed, and those powerful nations that can make a two-state solution viable and possible and implementable should act in that regard. The long overdue announcement by increasing number of countries to recognize the state of Palestine is testament to this determination. We have a responsibility as the member states of the United Nations to reaffirm the right also of self-determination of the people of Western Sahara. The very first resolution of the United Nations General Assembly in January of 1946 called for the elimination of atomic weapons. The resolution was passed shortly after the catastrophic use of atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki that killed thousands of people. Decades later, we have not made significant progress in the fulfillment of the commitment to nuclear disarmament. In 2026, next year, South Africa will be presiding over the first review conference of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. This treaty reaffirms that there is no greater assurance of non-proliferation than the complete prohibition of nuclear weapons. I was glad to hear that a number of leaders stood here to speak against nuclear weapons and the use thereof. This year we celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action as a roadmap for the achievement of gender equality, the empowerment of the women and girls of the world. South Africa reaffirms its unwavering commitment to the empowerment of women and their full, equal, and meaningful participation in all spheres of life. Yes, we would support also the election of a female Secretary General of the United Nations. The Beijing conference milestone reminds us of our shared responsibility to advance human rights, dignity, and justice for all. We are all equal, men and women, and there is no reason that we continue to hold the women of the world backwards. The right to development must be central to the policies and operational activities of the United Nations and its specialized agencies, programs, as well as funds. It must be at the core of the policies and strategies of the international financial and multilateral trading systems. As we celebrate 80 years of the United Nations, we must seize the opportunity to build a better United Nations for the next 80 years. What is needed now is a stronger and more capable United Nations. A United Nations that is based on the renewed commitment to its founding principles. We must invigorate the negotiations on the Security Council reform at the intergovernmental negotiations in the General Assembly, including by initiating text-based negotiations. The Security Council must be accountable. It must also be representative. It must be democratic and effective in executing its mandate. We can no longer accept that a large portion of the world's population is not represented in the United Nations Security Council. My own continent, Africa, home to 1.4 billion people, as well as South America, are not represented in the United Nations Security Council. This is unjust, this is unacceptable, and it must end. We want representation in the Security Council. We look forward to working with the Secretary General on the UN 80 initiative to ensure that our organization works more effectively and efficiently. Mandates given by member states must be implemented, and the necessary structural changes and program realignment must be implemented across the UN system. In the face of the decrease in funding to the United Nations to fulfill its mandate, the UN 80 initiative is important to maintain the integrity of the multilateral system and to uphold international law. Lastly, I am reminded that our collective membership of the United Nations is our shared humanity in action. The United Nations at 80 compels us to reflect on our collective achievements and to chart a way forward, building an organization that is able to address our common challenges. We must rise to the occasion and do our utmost together to ensure the political, economic, and social freedom of all humanity. We must reaffirm that freedom is indivisible and that the denial of the rights of one person diminishes the freedom of all of us. We must reaffirm the equal dignity and worth of every person and must therefore leave no one behind and no country behind. I thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of South Africa. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Shavkat Mirziyoyev, President of the Republic of Uzbekistan. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Distinguished Madam President, distinguished Secretary General, heads of delegations, ladies and gentlemen. I am truly delighted to extend my congratulations to you with the 80th anniversary session of the United Nations General Assembly. Our meeting today is taking place in a complex, rapidly changing global situation that calls for new approaches to the work of our organization and its future. Today, across the world, the role and place of international institutions are weakening. Confrontations, conflicts, and wars are intensifying. Technological and social inequality is increasing. An economic and humanitarian crisis are deepening. All of this is creating an entirely new and unsettling geopolitical reality. We highly commend the efforts of His Excellency Secretary General Antonio Guterres aimed at maintaining our organization as a main platform for the peaceful resolution of the most difficult and pressing global issues. In this regard, we fully support the UNAT initiative and reaffirm our strong commitment to the Pact for the Future. We support the transformation of the United Nations Security Council and the expansion of its membership in order to effectively address current threats and challenges and protect the interests of the developing countries. Distinguished participants of the session, we are pursuing a policy to build a democratic, law-governed, social, and secular new Uzbekistan in full alignment with the Sustainable Development Goals. To this end, we are consistently continuing our irreversible reforms. Our top priority goal is to fundamentally transform the lives of each and every family and citizen in our country to enhance human dignity and well-being. In recent years, we have managed to reduce the poverty rate in Uzbekistan from 35% to 6.6%. We have achieved this result primarily through the transformation of the education and science sector, establishment of innovative industries and high-tech manufacturing enterprises, modernization of green energy and transport infrastructure, comprehensive development of small businesses, and as a result, the creation of millions of jobs. In our country, preschool education coverage has increased from 27% to 78%, while the higher education uptake among our youth has risen from 9% to 42%. Most importantly, we consider enhancing the prestige of the teaching profession as a key issue. In order to create a single international platform for the exchange of teachers' experience and knowledge, we propose to hold a World Summit on Professional Education in Uzbekistan. We are also creating an advanced healthcare system in our country. We invite all our foreign partners to participate in a high-level event dedicated to the fight against childhood cancer and other serious diseases, which will be held tomorrow at our initiative at the United Nations headquarters. Another important area is gender policy. We aim to further strengthen the role of women in social, political, and business life of our country. We advocate for holding the Asian Women's Forum on a regular basis in our region, turning it into a permanent platform. I would like to emphasize once again, we remain committed to our obligations in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. By the year 2030, we intend to join the ranks of upper middle income countries. To this end, we will consistently continue our open and pragmatic policy. Ladies and gentlemen, 8 years ago, from this esteemed podium, we declared our firm determination to transform Central Asia into a region of peace, good neighborliness, and partnership. Today, we can confidently declare that we have achieved this strategic goal. The era of closed borders, unresolved disputes, and conflicts is in the past. In recent years, the volume of mutual trade, investments, and transportation of goods in our region has increased fivefold. We are implementing joint investment funds, cross-border trade, and industrial cooperation zones, and major infrastructure projects. We also recognize as a common achievement that the consultative meeting of the heads of the state of Central Asia have become an effective mechanism for deepening regional integration. I can confidently affirm that as of now, We are at the beginning stage of the forming a new Central Asia. Our region thanks in particular, we propose holding an international forum under the auspices of ECOSOC and UNCTAD, dedicated to the economic development of the Central Asian states, establishing a regional hub for green technologies in industry jointly with UNIDO, adopting program on the rational use of water resources, the creation of green spaces, and the achievement of demographic resilience in our region. In addition, we propose the adoption of UN General Assembly resolution supporting the efforts of the Central Asian countries aimed at deepening regional partnership and economic integration. Distinguished heads of delegations, speaking about global and regional security and sustainable development, it is impossible to overlook the issue of Afghanistan. Supporting the aspirations of Afghan people for a peaceful and stable life requires the united efforts of the international community. I would like to emphasize that it is of utmost importance to prevent this country's isolation. We intend to implement large-scale economic and infrastructure projects in that country. We propose to adopt a dedicated UN resolution on the development of transport and energy corridors of international significance through the territory of Afghanistan. At the same time, we cannot turn a blind eye to the deeply worsening humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip. We call for an immediate cessation of hostility and the continuation of political negotiations. In line with the UN resolutions, we remain steadfast supporters of the two-state solution principle. We are also deeply concerned by the situation around Ukraine. We welcome the start of the high-level dialogue aimed at resolving the crisis through diplomatic means. Distinguished participants of the event, effective measures are being undertaken to implement the global counterterrorism strategy in Central Asia. In cooperation with the UN Office of Counterterrorism, a regional council on rehabilitation and reintegration was established. We propose to transform this council into an international competence center. This very body will serve as an important platform for exchanging experiences on adapting to peaceful life for those repatriated from conflict zones. Furthermore, we stand ready to provide all the necessary conditions for the establishment of the Regional Office of Counterterrorism in Uzbekistan. Dear ladies and gentlemen, in today's world full of threats, we are witnessing how vulnerable the global transport system is. These challenges primarily have a negative impact on the stability of landlocked developing countries. It is of utmost importance to ensure the security of international transit corridors and to establish efficient logistics networks. In this regard, we believe the time has come to introduce a global mechanism on strengthening transport connectivity to achieve sustainable development goals. I would also like to draw special attention to the increasingly acute challenges of climate change. For instance, the consequences of the RLC desiccation must remain at the constant focus of the international community. We are consistently continuing our work to restore the RLC ecosystem. In recent years, salt-tolerant desert plants have been planted on 2 million hectares of the dried seabed of RLC. By the year 2030, green cover will be created on 80% of this area. Another serious issue is the water scarcity. As of now, more than 2 billion people in the world do not have access to clean drinking water. We are planning to hold a World Forum on water saving in our country. The outcomes of this conference are expected to recognize the water crisis as a serious threat to sustainable development. We intend to adopt a special roadmap for the wide introduction of innovation technologies in a global level. Another adverse consequence of climate change is the intensifying trend of climate migration. Unfortunately, clear international mechanisms and the legal framework in this direction have not yet been created. We advocate for the adoption of the Global Pact for a broad international partnership and coordinated policy on this serious issue. Dear participants of the meeting, it is of great importance to prevent inequalities in digital development and the use of artificial intelligence between countries. We propose to create an international cooperation mechanism aimed at the gratis exchange of practical solutions and models of artificial intelligence in healthcare, education, and culture. I would like to emphasize another priority issue. Our future, the destiny, and the prosperity of the world are in the hands of the younger generation. It is our urgent task to instill in the hearts and minds of our sons and daughters the most noble ideas, such as peace, humanism, and friendship, mutual trust, and respect. In this regard, we put forward the proposal to establish the World Youth Movement for Peace and to locate its headquarters in Uzbekistan. We are consistently implementing a policy of tolerance in our society. At the same time, we will actively continue our efforts to deeply study the ideas of Islamic enlightenment and promote them to the world. In the coming months, we will open the Center of Islamic Civilization, which is unique for our wider region. We intend to hold a special presentation at the United Nations of the rich spiritual and scientific heritage of our great ancestors, thinkers and scholars such as Imam Bukhari, Imam Tirmizi, and Imam Maturidi. Dear ladies and gentlemen, the new Uzbekistan is a supporter of mutual solidarity, open dialogue, and close partnership with all countries. We are always ready to contribute to strengthening dialogue among peoples, cultures, and civilizations, and to achieving universal human goals. I thank you very much for your attention.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of Republic of Uzbekistan. We have heard the last speaker in the general debate for this meeting. The next plenary meeting to continue with the general debate will be held immediately following the adjournment of this meeting. The meeting is adjourned. The fifth plenary meeting of the General Assembly is called to order. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Hurelsuk Ukna, President of Mongolia. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Madam President, Mr. Secretary General, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, At the outset, I wish to extend my sincere congratulations to Ms. Annalena Baerbock on assuming the important role of the President of the General Assembly at this historic moment marking the 80th anniversary of the United Nations, and my best wishes for a successful session. 8 centuries ago, the great Chinggis Khan established the Great Mongolian Empire, bringing together the West and the East under the rule of justice and principled statecraft. Spanning the vast expanse of Eurasia, the Pax Mongolica era heralded a period of remarkable progress and flourishing for humankind. The Pax Mongolica embodied progressive ideals that form the basis of today's collective efforts to maintain global peace and stability. Then, 8 decades ago, when the dust and ashes of the World War had not cleared yet and humanity had not healed yet from fear and anxiety, the United Nations, a great family of nations, rose to prominence as a guarantor of world peace and security and a sanctuary of hope and trust. Since its establishment, the United Nations has illuminated humanity's path, serving as a steadfast beacon of hope and trust for nations to maintain peaceful coexistence and share a prosperous future. In today's volatile and challenging international environment, we welcome Better Together, 80 years and more for peace, development, and human rights as the theme for the 80th session of the General Assembly and the general debate. Indeed, this theme calls upon us to assess and reflect upon the United Nations' achievements and challenges over the past 80 years, further strengthen its work in accordance with the United Nations Charter and the principles of international law, and combine our collective voices and efforts in pursuit of concrete and tangible outcomes. Distinguished delegates, Mongolia has consistently upheld the United Nations Charter and universally recognized principles and norms of international law, respecting the independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of all states, resolving disputes by peaceful means, respecting human rights and freedoms, and fostering equal and mutually beneficial cooperation. Since becoming a full-fledged member of the United Nations in 1961, Mongolia has steadfastly supported the organization's efforts to strengthen international peace and security. It has demonstrated its enduring commitments to disarmament and non-proliferation and declared its territories nuclear weapon-free status. Furthermore, Mongolia has actively collaborated with the United Nations at all levels, including establishing a dialogue mechanism in Northeast Asia, participating in the United Nations peacekeeping operations, and putting forward various proposals and initiatives in the areas of socio-economic development, environment, and climate change to advance the implementation of development policy and goals. During his visit to Mongolia in 2022, United Nations Secretary-General Mr. Antonio Guterres described our nation as a symbol of peace in a troubled world. It is a profound recognition of Mongolia's humble contributions and dedication to the work of the United Nations and its enduring commitment to the cause of peace. Over the past 23 years, Mongolia has continuously deployed personnel from its armed forces to United Nations peacekeeping operations, making a meaningful contribution to global and regional peace and security. During this period, Mongolia has deployed more than 23,000 peacekeepers to 16 United Nations peacekeeping missions and consistently ranked among the top 20 troop and police contributing countries out of more than 120 member states. As we mark the 25th anniversary of UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security, it is a pleasure to announce that through the steady increase in the deployment of female military personnel, the proportion of women peacekeepers from Mongolia has reached 14% in 2025. Mongolia will continue to extend its unwavering support to the United Nations in its efforts to maintain international peace and security, and it remains committed to contributing to peacekeeping operations. Distinguished delegates, at this critical juncture, with only 5 years remaining until the 2030 agenda deadline, global progress toward achieving the Sustainable Development Goals stands at the mere 17%. According to the Sustainable Development Report 2025, Mongolia's implementation of the SDGs has reached 66.7%, ranking it 14th in the United Nations Multilateralism Index. This is a testament to our decades-long efforts and a worthy achievement. I want to acknowledge the tremendous efforts of the international community and all member states in advancing the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. We welcome the outcomes of the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development, held recently in Seville, Spain, where a broad consensus was reached on the crucial role of financing in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. We also appreciate that the conference agreed to increase the engagement of developing countries and take comprehensive actions aimed at reforming the current international financial architecture. Within the framework of implementing the Seville commitment adopted at the conference, it is essential to direct international development cooperation towards supporting the most vulnerable groups and addressing their challenges. It is my pleasure to note that Mongolia has been playing an active role within the United Nations in advocating the interests of landlocked developing countries, in raising awareness of their special needs and unique circumstances, and closely collaborating with them to ensure their voices are heard on the global stage. The 3rd United Nations Conference on Landlocked Developing Countries convened in August in Turkmenistan and adopted the AVASA Program of Action for 2024 and 2034. Landlocked developing countries have long faced trade and economic development challenges due to their geographic location. Member states have committed to implementing the program to advance the development of landlocked developing countries over the next decade and bring positive improvements to the livelihoods of more than 600 million people living in these countries. To ensure the effective implementation of the AVASA Program of Action, it is crucial for landlocked developing countries to align their national development plans with the program while mobilizing all available resources to strengthen regional integration and cooperation. Furthermore, we call upon the international community, financial institutions, and development partners to provide concrete support and cooperation with landlocked developing countries. Distinguished delegates, Mother Earth is our one and only home. However, as a result of humanity's careless behavior towards the environment, Mother Earth, with her very existence under threat, is sending a distress call like a patient in critical condition. If we do not take resolute action to preserve our Mother Earth now, she will inevitably find her own way to survive, with or without us. Since ancient times, we Mongols have believed that all beneath the sky is alive. We have revered mountains, rivers, plants, and animals, understanding that the harmony of the earth and the living world is inseparably intertwined with humanity's inner life and conscious actions. 2 millennia ago, the great Han Modon of the Huns, the Mongols' ancestors, proclaimed that the very foundation of the state is the land. Thus, UNESCO recognized this time-honored tradition of revering nature by inscribing the Mongolian traditional ritual of worshipping sacred sites on the last of the intangible cultural heritage in need of urgent safeguarding. We Mongols are a people blessed with the beautiful tradition of living in harmony with Mother Nature, preserving her pristine purity and nurturing our children from an early age with the mindset and spirit to cherish her. Accordingly, the United Nations General Assembly resolution entitled 800 Years of Mongolian Statehood, adopted in 2005, highly appreciated the contribution of Mongols to humankind's history and recognized the ever-increasing significance and relevance of a culture of living in harmony with nature, which is inherent in nomadic civilization in today's world. Today, we are committed to sharing our cultural heritage and traditional knowledge, rooted in a profound respect for living in harmony with nature, with the international community as a valuable contribution to building resilience and enhancing adaptation to climate change. In 2026, Mongolia will host the 17th session of the Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification and observe the International Year of Rangelands and Pastoralists. In this spirit, our country, in partnership with the United Nations, spearheads the International 10-Year Rangeland Flagship Initiative. We warmly invite you to join us in supporting and collaborating on this important endeavor. Mongolian people say, the source of life is water, and the source of water is tree. Access to safe drinking water is declining worldwide, with 3.6 billion people currently affected by water scarcity. Therefore, it is imperative for countries to implement integrated management of land and water resources in a coordinated manner and to place special emphasis on preventing water scarcity. I cordially invite you all to participate at the highest level with broad participation in the 17th session of the Conference of the Party to the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, scheduled from August 17 to 28, 2026 in Ulaanbaatar. This conference seeks comprehensive solutions to adapt to climate change, protect and enhance water resources, and combat desertification and land degradation. Distinguished delegates, from the moment of birth, we Mongols have grown up on horseback, carrying our glory across the world on noble steeds and contributing to the writing of humanity's proud and enduring history. We Mongols are a nation steeped in a unique cultural heritage. We honor our noble horse in our state emblem, craft our state flag with the mane and tail hair of our swift steeds, and the souls of people around the world are spellbound by the haunting melody of horse fiddle known as the modern whore. Since ancient times, horses have been integral to human livelihoods, culture, and civilization. With the goal of preserving and safeguarding cultural heritage and traditions associated with horses and highlighting their enduring role in humankind's livelihoods, Mongolia proposed a resolution to designate July 11th as World Horse Day. This resolution was adopted during the plenary meeting of the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly on June 3, 2025. On this occasion, I would like to extend my deepest gratitude on behalf of the horse-loving people of Mongolia to all UN member states for their support in adopting this resolution to designate and observe World Horse Day on the day of Mongolia's National Nadam Festival, which is also inscribed on UNESCO's representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Distinguished delegates, This year, countries around the world are assessing the progress made over the past 30 years since the adoption of the Copenhagen Declaration on Social Development and the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. Mongolia has undertaken a broad range of policies and activities to advance the social development goals outlined in these milestone documents, related legal frameworks, and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. These efforts have focused on poverty reduction, promoting social equality and inclusion, supporting families, children, and youth, and protecting the rights of the elderly and persons with disabilities. Among these efforts, the state policy on gender equality aims to ensure equal rights, opportunities, and treatment for both men and women while actively preventing and eliminating gender-based discrimination. Notably, Mongolia has greatly prioritized advancing gender equality and increasing women's participation in decision-making, with women now making up 25% of our parliament. We are pleased to underscore that, according to the Global Gender Gap Report 2025 by the World Economic Forum, Mongolia ranked 65th globally, improving by 20 places from the previous year and securing 5th place in the Asia-Pacific region. In recent years, Mongolia has regularly hosted international events dedicated to women and gender equality, including the International Conference on Strengthening the Role of Women in Peacekeeping in 2022, the Female Foreign Ministers Meeting in 2023, and the World Women's Forum in 2024 in cooperation with the United Nations. Last month, we successfully hosted the World Women Entrepreneurs Forum under the theme Inspire, Impact, Invest in Ulaanbaatar. I wish to extend my heartfelt gratitude to all countries that supported and participated in the forum. Mongolia will continue to serve as a strong bridge of partnership, cooperation, and solidarity in advancing women's leadership and participation at all levels of social and political life. Distinguished delegates, the ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus once said, "The only constant in life is change." Supported by its member states, successive UN leadership have consistently pursued reforms to refine the organization's structure and operations across all aspects. In this context, Mongolia welcomes and supports the UN 80 initiative that the United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres presented. We are confident that ensuring gender equality in senior leadership positions within the United Nations will undoubtedly have a positive impact on fostering more transparent, balanced, and inclusive decision-making processes. Therefore, we support initiatives to nominate women candidates for the UN Secretary-General and the Rotation for Equality initiative, which calls for gender rotation in the UN General Assembly President's position. Furthermore, Mongolia upholds and implements the principles of the UN Charter and universally recognized norms of international law, actively contributing to strengthening the UN-centered multilateral system. Mongolia reaffirms its commitment to the UN reform, particularly of the Security Council, to ensure it reflects current realities and embodies equitable and fair representation, inclusivity, transparency, effectiveness, democracy, and accountability. In an era defined by escalating conflicts, rising walls of distrust, and deepening divisions, it is more vital than ever to foster international relations grounded not merely in multipolarity, but on multi-pillar principles that honor each nation's history, culture, civilization, national interests, and unique development paths. The United Nations was established 80 years ago with the noble goals of saving humanity from the scourge of war and maintaining international peace and security. The United Nations, the cornerstone for the peaceful and harmonious coexistence among nations, must be reinforced and empowered through strong multipolar principles that ensure equal rights and balanced influence. Therefore, let us reflect solemnly on whether the mission entrusted to the United Nations 8 decades ago has been fully realized, and let all member states join hands in a shared commitment to revitalize the organization into a powerful institution strong enough to usher in Pax Globalica, a lasting world peace, by embodying the ideals of the Pax Mongolica, which laid the foundation for peaceful coexistence among nations and human progress 8 centuries ago. At this pivotal moment, as we commemorate the historic 80th anniversary of the United Nations, I would like to emphasize the growing importance of its role in fostering mutual understanding, trust, and respect among nations, as well as in advancing peace, stability, development, and the vision of a world free from war. Mongolia has consistently pursued a peace-loving and multipolar foreign policy, made tangible contributions to international peace and sustainable development, and remains committed to fulfilling this responsibility with honor. I extend my heartfelt congratulations to you all on the momentous occasion of the 80th anniversary of the United Nations. May the eternal blue sky bless us with peace throughout the world. Thank you for your attention.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of Mongolia. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Sardar Bardi Muhammadov, President of Turkmenistan. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Distinguished Mr. President, distinguished heads and members of delegations, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, allow me to congratulate you on the opening of the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly and to wish you a productive session. I would like to congratulate Ms. Annalena Baerbock on her election as President of the General Assembly and wish her every success. I would also like to express my sincere appreciation to Ambassador Philemon Yang for his skillful and effective leadership of the General Assembly during the previous session. Distinguished participants, the current state of global affairs, as well as the nature and trends of political, economic, and social processes, objectively require a decisive shift towards coordinated interaction among states and international organizations in order to achieve our shared overarching goal, the maintenance of peace and security, the creation of conditions for further progressive development, and the preservation of the legal foundations underpinning the modern world order. It is precisely from this standpoint that Turkmenistan views the main objectives of the 80th session of the General Assembly, placing great hopes in its role in shaping a robust, balanced, and secure global architecture. A key area of Turkmenistan's cooperation with the United Nations is ensuring international peace and security. Recognizing its responsibility as a permanently neutral state, Turkmenistan stands ready to take further practical steps to foster an atmosphere of cooperation, mutual understanding, and respectful dialogue. These are the principal defining conditions for ensuring stability and sustainable development at the global and regional levels. We are convinced that one of the most effective mechanisms for advancing and achieving these goals today is the practical application of the principle of neutrality. In this regard, Turkmenistan has initiated the inclusion of a separate item on the agenda of the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly, entitled Neutrality for Peace and Security. We deem this important in light of the growing recognition by the international community of the significance of neutrality, as well as the awareness of its potential and utility in the context of the UN's peace-building strategy. In line with this, during this session, Turkmenistan will propose a draft resolution entitled The Role and Importance of the Policy of Neutrality in Maintaining and Strengthening International Peace, Security, and the Process of Sustainable Development. As you are well aware, this year has been proclaimed by the General Assembly the International Year of Peace and Trust on the initiative of Turkmenistan. This landmark event coincides with the anniversary of the establishment of the United Nations. In December this year, Turkmenistan will host a major high-level international forum on the Year of Peace and Trust. We see this as a tangible contribution to achieving the strategic goals of the United Nations, and we look forward to broad and representative international participation. We believe that harmonizing national approaches to global development trends, as well as to establishing and strengthening trust and mutual understanding, should be systematic and consistent. In this regard, Turkmenistan is seeking to initiate the convening of a World Summit on a Culture of Peace and Trust. One of the key objectives of this summit would be to develop a global code of international trust. This would serve as a universal foundation for building relations between states based on the respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, as well as on cooperation and joint efforts to address global problems. We believe that ensuring universal peace and mutual understanding is inseparable from the civilizational aspects of modern development and from the need to preserve and foster cultural and spiritual ties. In this context, Central Asia, which for centuries has played a clear role as a bridge spanning the civilizations of East and West, is now called upon to revive its historic mission to become a space for dialogue, cooperation, and the convergence of values and worldviews. Therefore, during this session, Turkmenistan will propose, in cooperation with the United Nations, an international forum to be held entitled Central Asia, a Space of Peaceful Coexistence. Countries of the region will participate, as well as other interested states and international institutions. Turkmenistan will also submit a draft resolution to the General Assembly on proclaiming an International Day of Mediation. This would emphasize the importance of diplomacy and neutral platforms in preventing and resolving conflicts. One of our country's priorities remains our active involvement in implementing the Sustainable Development Goals and in strengthening cooperation in key areas such as transport and energy. As Turkmenistan is one of the centers of multilateral dialogue on these issues, we will continue to contribute to establishing a fair, balanced, and inclusive international development system. During this session, Turkmenistan will initiate the proclamation of a United Nations Decade for Sustainable Transport for the period 2026-2035 and will submit the relevant draft resolution. We are convinced that this will help to consolidate the efforts of the international community in developing transport corridors, enhancing their sustainability and ensuring accessibility for all countries. Our country will also submit a draft resolution to the General Assembly entitled "The Key Role of Reliable and Stable Energy Connectivity in Ensuring Sustainable Development." At present, one of the priority issues on the development agenda is the digital transformation. We are convinced that this transformation must be balanced. It must reflect the realities and legitimate interests of all states, including the developing world, and also must be free from politicization and bias. In this regard, Turkmenistan intends to put forward an initiative to establish a world platform on digital integration. This is to be based on the principles of equality, trust, and on preventing the use of information and communication technologies to harm peace, security, and sustainable development. During the 80th session, Turkmenistan will continue its work on environmental and climate issues. It will strive for them to be taken into consideration systematically, as they are basic components of ensuring security, and we will advocate for the establishment of multilateral mechanisms to monitor and respond to climate, environmental, and man-made disasters. Turkmenistan will seek to bring about a regional centre to combat desertification for Central Asian countries. It is our belief that the establishment of such a centre would contribute to building regional capacity, to strengthening cooperation in the field of environmental protection, and would also make a significant contribution to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly in combating climate change and protecting land-based ecosystems. Our country will promote the Caspian Environmental Initiative, proposed at the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly, which is intended to become an international platform to preserve the Caspian Sea ecosystem. An important step in this direction is the Caspian Environmental Forum, which we propose holding in 2026. We are convinced that now it is especially important to strengthen the role of the UN in fostering broad humanitarian cooperation, in promoting rapprochement and mutual understanding among peoples, and in overcoming value and spiritual barriers, as well as engaging effective channels of cultural diplomacy. To develop intercultural dialogue and to lend practical support to General Assembly resolutions on multilingualism in international relations, we are proposing proclaiming an International Day of Multilingual Diplomacy as well. Distinguished heads and members of delegations, all of Turkmenistan's international initiatives and actions are always measured against and aligned with the UN Charter and its founding documents, as well as with its long-term goals. It is no coincidence that we always emphasize that cooperation with the UN is a strategic priority for Turkmenistan. We say this with a conviction that the UN is the only international organization endowed with universal legitimacy. In this regard, it must remain the guarantor of peace and development, and be the backbone of global security and stability. Turkmenistan will continue to advocate consistently for strengthening the central role of the UN in international affairs. We consider strengthening the primacy of international law and in improving the international legal framework and increasing the effectiveness of the implementation of UN conventions, treaties, agreements, and other multilateral documents as key factors in this regard. In this context, Turkmenistan is initiating the proclamation of the Year of International Law in 2028. This will become an important step in strengthening the international legal foundations of peace and cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, this session holds special significance for Turkmenistan. 30 years ago, within these very walls, the United Nations General Assembly unanimously adopted the resolution on the permanent neutrality of Turkmenistan. For our country, this was a momentous, historic event. In essence, it determined the entire subsequent course of Turkmenistan's foreign and international policy. International recognition of our neutrality also contributed to boosting the country's domestic development by providing favourable external conditions for this. I would like to take this opportunity on behalf of the people of Turkmenistan to express my gratitude to the United Nations member states and the entire international community for the decision adopted in December 1995 to recognise the permanent neutrality of Turkmenistan, a decision reaffirmed by 2 subsequent UN General Assembly resolutions. Turkmenistan will always remember the trust placed in it and will steadfastly and unswervingly uphold its international commitments. Once again, I would like to congratulate all delegations on the opening of the 80th anniversary session of the United Nations General Assembly and wish you every success in strengthening our cooperation and mutual understanding. Thank you very much indeed.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of Turkmenistan. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Gabriel Boric Font, President of the Republic of Chile. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Distinguished President, members of the United Nations General Assembly, guests, peoples of the world, residents of New York. 80 years have elapsed since the creation of the United Nations. 80 years have also elapsed since Gabriela Mistral, a Chilean woman who came from the Elqui Valley, won the Nobel Literature Prize. Her voice as a poet, a teacher, as a diplomat continues to ring out in our homeland and across the world. And it was precisely here in New York in 1955 that the Chilean ambassador, José Massa, conveyed a message about human rights that was written by Gabriela Mistral. That message said, "I would be happy if our noble strength, our noble struggle to obtain human rights was taken up faithfully and loyally by all nations of the world. This triumph would be the greatest we could achieve in our time." We have we notched up that victory? Have we triumphed in that way? The answer is categorical no. And the fact is, at this stage, I don't really know what to say about Gaza, because many people have said everything already at this podium and at others, but there are our words and those that may be spoken by anyone, but regardless, we still have the fact that innocent people have lost their lives. We still have the empty stares of those suffering. In 2025, thousands of innocent people have lost their lives simply on the grounds of being Palestinian. 80 years ago, the same thing happens. Millions lost their lives simply for being Jewish. Instead of talking about figures, issuing condemnations or demands, as we tend to within these walls, instead of that, I want to talk about humankind. Humanity. Gaza is a global crisis because it is a crisis of humanity. And in this chamber, and for those who are listening to us in their homes, within their delegations, in their various countries, all of us are human beings. That's what I'd like to say. So when under the rubble, We have children, boys and girls, lying under that rubble. There is genuine pain and grief in our homeland in Chile. And I know that that pain is shared by the vast majority of the world's nations. And one of the problems we face as humankind is that often pain engenders hatred. But we must face up to pain and that fact and combat hatred with all of our strength. We must transform our desires to hate into a desire for justice. We can't make any concessions to violence. I don't want to see, Netanyahu destroyed by a missile side by side with his family. I want to see Netanyahu and those responsible for the genocide against the Palestinian people brought to the ICJ and other international courts. In another context, looking elsewhere, the war in Ukraine is also an affront to us. It causes us pain. But some people might ask themselves, what's that got to do with Chile? What's happening in Ukraine got to do with Chile? They're so far apart, we don't understand their language. Some people level those arguments against us and our homelands. We say back to them that we have to see ourselves in the people in Palestine that are searching for food. We have to identify and stand in the shoes of the kidnapped children that have been taken away by Russia. We're all human beings. And one of the reasons we come here and meet today together is that we perhaps continue to have faith in humankind. That's principally what brings us here. Our hearts cannot cease to be moved by pain, and we cannot cease to be moved by the needs of others like ourselves. It's for that reason that we have set down rules which are steps forward for civilizations, and they come from the lessons we've learned from the major challenges we've affronted as humankind. And these rules, we should say this loud and clear from this rostrum and take action here. These principles, these values are not being respected. Let's say that loud and clear. It's not okay to invite people to negotiate, to invite a neutral country to negotiate and then assassinate someone that's helping negotiations. That's what happens with Qatar. We can't bomb the nuclear facilities of another country. We can't invade countries like Iraq, saying that there are weapons of mass destruction that don't exist. That's not okay. It's not okay to invade a sovereign country like Ukraine and then impose negotiations on those people. And we all seem to resign ourselves to the fact that that's going on, as was recalled by the French writer Albert Camus when he talked about the experience of the Second World War. If we don't believe in anything, if nothing makes sense, and we can't invoke any values, well, in that case, everything is allowed. There's no good, no evil, and nothing is important. So, if we were to accept that reasoning, we'd have to admit that reason stands on the side of the successful party and no one else. And the rule which we use to assess humankind, the yardstick, would simply be effectiveness. So, in other words, the law of might is right. I want to say to you that ultimately this way of reasoning is the justification of killing. In a world where that occurs, the life of a woman, a man, or their children will always depend on fate or some whims of good or evil, arbitrary decisions. In a world like that, all of those that live without condemning hatred with all of their might are as guilty of homicide as the person dropping a bomb or pulling a trigger. Particularly if you have the voice and the power to say enough, as we do, as all the leaders that we are in this room, we have, with that in mind, greater responsibility. We refuse to rule in favor of those who have might or money, and we say that we're labeled as utopian, nursing pipe dreams. But what is history if not a continued utopian voyage? There will be people who simply want to do things that produce short-term results. But in general terms, shortcuts lead us to the edge of precipices, to the abyss. And the fact is, we don't need to be successful in the way we understand success today in the Western world to continue fighting for a fairer world, because we know that what we have together has allowed us to change the world, to make it more just, have more loyalty, more solidarity, more inclusion. We've done that. So, distinguished delegates, when we are invited to submit, to bow down, when it is said that intelligence is somehow irrelevant, when people want to show us that you can lie to get an advantage, to get ahead, we want to say no. We're not giving way to cunning trickery, violence or passivity. Let us say no to all of that. I can and I must respect the person who likes blue more than red, someone who is of a faith that's not my own, the person who thinks it's better to increase or reduce taxes according to the circumstances. Ultimately, I can and I must respect diversity of opinion. But at the same time as I respect different opinions, the opinions of those who think different to me, I face the outrage, the fact that people lie. And what's all the more outrageous is that they're aware that they're lying. Perhaps, for example, it's been said at this very rostrum today that there's no such thing as global warming. This is not an opinion. It's a lie. And lies must be fought against. Of course, we can discuss the best way of tackling global warming, or we can talk about who are more responsible than others, but we can't deny global warming. We can argue, we can discuss how the Nazis managed to govern such vast swathes of Europe, but we can't deny the Holocaust. We can study the secondary effects of a vaccine, but we cannot state with no evidence whatsoever that vaccines cause autism. The world needs a true, genuine dialogue between those of us who think differently, between people who have different visions of the world. It's for that reason that we created the United Nations, for that precise reason, to have dialogue and to decide that brutality is not acceptable, to decide that human rights must be protected regardless of ideologies or who's the victim or who's the torturer. That international law is the guarantee that reason will prevail over might always. Opposed against this dialogue, the other direction is lies and silence, and both will bring us to the edge of an abyss, into deepest suffering. So what is the task before us today? We have to chart the course that we want as humankind and work with the United Nations, who are paving this path. Chile is rallying behind this shared vision, this shared respect for democracy, human rights, social justice, equity, unfettered respect for the freedom of expression, climate action, all of these things that stand as pillars of hope and action to address the difficult changes and weather these current storms. Today, we need to say loud and clear that we defend a commitment to democracy always in an nuanced fashion with no excuses whatsoever. For that reason, this week, together with Brazil, Spain and Uruguay and Colombia, we convened the second meeting for the defense of democracy. That was a collected effort that began here in the United Nations a year ago. We want to build bridges so that we can identify the shortcomings of democracy. We want to look at ways of remedying these shortcomings and of improving the quality of life of our peoples. We will not settle with simply pointing out what we don't like about the world. We will not settle for saying that doesn't represent us. We want to propose ideas that we want to see and champion them. With all of that in mind, I'd like to briefly dwell on one particular issue. I come from Chile, that is a tricontinental country. Tricontinental. It has inextricable ties to the ocean. We have more than 6,700 kilometers of coastline. We are a country that looks at the ocean, and as such we are proud of having been the first country in America and the second in the world to have ratified the BBNJ agreement to extend governed ocean area beyond areas of national jurisdiction. In recent weeks, we saw the 60th ratification necessary for it to enter into force. As such, the first COP of that agreement will be held next year. We do hope it will be held early next year. Here, I wish to reiterate the fact that we are ready and willing to have its secretariat established in our Pearl of the Pacific in the city of Valparaiso, because we believe that this agreement is an opportunity to make ocean governance closer to the global south. Chile is always also a country that looks towards and has an Antarctic vocation. Our leadership in scientific research is clear. We provide logistical support for research, and we have campaigns for the protection of this area. When you've gone to Antarctic, you will have done so through Chile. In 2 weeks, we'll have another meeting of the Commission for the Preservation of Marine Antarctic Resources. So I call upon states parties now to approve the proposal of the marine protected area for Dominion 1. That was the proposal established by Chile and Argentina. We cannot simply exploit resources if we don't adopt appropriate preservation measures, because ultimately we'll see the destruction of marine life, which we also depend on. Let us not forget that we are part of one single ecosystem. Maintaining biodiversity and sustaining life on Earth is something we must urgently grapple with, and we need to do so with a sense of responsibility towards our ancestors, towards those we share the planet with today, and with a sense of responsibility to future generations. Distinguished delegates, as we have a situation of climate crisis, protracted conflicts and humanitarian crisis, against that backdrop, the selection and appointment process for the next Secretary General of the United Nations takes on particular significance. I come to this assembly convinced of the fact that always, even in the most difficult circumstances, there is room to take clear-sighted action as a collective body, action which is transformative and imbued with humanity. Human tragedy is never a foregone conclusion. We will not give up on the hope that there will be good in the world and that the United Nations we need can be built, because that conclusion depends on what we do. I want to say to you that regional balance must be respected in the Secretary General appointment process. It's time for Latin America and the Caribbean to have their moment. We are a war-free region with a rich diplomatic tradition. We forge consensus. We are unwaveringly committed to the UN Charter and have been since its very inception. Tackling the historic gender imbalance within the United Nations is important. We've never had a woman Secretary General, and that is something we must remedy. 80 years of history without a woman having been appointed Secretary General. The UN must reflect the progress made by the world and recognise that a woman at the helm is not just a symbol of equity, but also represents and reflects the fact that women are half of the population, and appointing a woman as Secretary General will send out the clear signal that women can occupy all parts of the world and nothing's closed off to them. Chile wants to actively contribute to that collective effort, and for that reason it is for me a great honour to announce from this rostrum that Chile will nominate our former President, Michelle Bachelet Jerie, as candidate to the post of Secretary General of the United Nations.
Que además nos está acompañando.
She is here with us at this session. Michelle Bachelet is not only someone known to all of you on the global stage. She is a woman whose own trajectory is fully in line with the values that inspired this organization. She was head of state of Chile twice. Incidentally, she was also the first female head of state. She was also the Minister for Health and Defense. She was the Executive Director of UN Women and also High Commissioner for Human Rights at the United Nations. Michelle Bachelet has governed, has negotiated, has solved problems and has listened. Her trajectory, what she's done throughout her life, combines empathy with strength and resolve, experience with openness, and she combines all of these with a proven ability to make decisions and to take action. In times of mistrust and fragmentation, I firmly believe, and I know that this conviction is shared by my nation, that Michelle Bachelet is someone able to build bridges between the North and the South, between the East and the West, between urgent needs to find solutions and the urgent need to defend principles. With her leadership, the United Nations will be able to restore credibility, effectiveness and a sense of purpose in the face of current challenges. She will build on the legacy of Antonio Guterres that I can say has given the best of himself from the good of humankind within this institution. With humility and a sense of conviction, Chile presents this candidacy with the conviction, the certainty that Michelle Bachelet will be able to make a decisive contribution to making the United Nations once more a place for meetings, place for solutions and active hope for the world as a whole. Distinguished delegates, 80 years. Let us look back at those decades and let us take stock of the strides forward seen in international governance. In spite of the challenges we're facing, we can also say that we have made progress. But we are eaten away at by the feeling that progress is under threat. Who will draw the maps of the future? We want to believe that those cartographers will not be those waging assaults on multilateral institutions and eroding their credibility. We don't want them to be those who humiliate the weak. We want all peoples together to draw the maps of the future. Together we represent all of those people, and together we will trace out clear maps so that we have not only a possible and viable future, but one that is full of dignity for everyone and respects them. And to achieve that goal, this organization, let us remember the organization that was built on the ashes of the Second World War after the failure of the League of Nations, this organization is crucial. And renewing it, changing it, reforming it is an urgent need. So, as a renewed organization, but one with the same purpose, it will be an organization that everyone works together in. The words of Victor Jara, that great Chilean singer, great Chilean artist, he talked about this great love of earth which has helped us to live. He loved peace, to enjoy life, love and freedom for everybody. He talked about those things so that his children could exist, his city could exist, and his people could exist. Let us, distinguished colleagues, move together, free and equal, similar and different. Let us walk along this shared path of seeking truth, justice, happiness, and justice. I thank you.
Muchas gracias. On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Chile. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Emomali Rahmon, President of the Republic of Tajikistan. I request the protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Your Excellency, Madam President, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. Today, as we commemorate the 80th anniversary of the adoption of the United Nations Charter, I extend to all member states my heartfelt congratulations and best wishes on this occasion. The contemporary world is undeniably experiencing a period of instability, turbulence, unpredictability, and escalating complexity. Geopolitical tensions, efforts to reshape a framework of international relations, conflicts and confrontations in different parts of the world, along with series of security threats and challenges have posed significant risks to lasting peace and safety. At the same time, the consequences of climate change and growing social inequality impose restrictions on the process of sustainable development and sustainable global development. In such a complex and turbulent circumstances, the role of the United Nations as a platform for inclusive dialogue, cooperation and the promotion of peace and security worldwide becomes more important than ever. In this regard, our countries should make joint and consistent efforts in international practice to protect this principle, return to full compliance with international law. In this process, strengthening equal cooperation among small and large states is also considered to be an important and timely step. Madam President, Tajikistan's National Development Strategy 2030 is fully aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals, and we support a full and timely implementation of this item of global agenda. Unfortunately, developing countries, particularly those mountainous and landlocked, face multiple challenges and difficulties in achieving these goals. Particularly vulnerable countries feel the need to take serious measures to ensure sustainable development, financing, and improve access to financial resources. Despite significant attempts in this field, the amount of funding for sustainable development offered by the international community continues to be insufficient to address their current need. This situation necessitates timely response, the allocation of additional funds, and a review of approach to the international financial architecture and system. Tajikistan advocates for effective and fair reforms of international financial instruments. At present, we are observing varying degrees of economic progress among nations, and the influence of developed nations and international financial organizations could play a significant role in tackling this issue. Many developing and less developed countries remain vulnerable to the impacts of economic and financial crisis, poverty, infectious diseases, including COVID, natural disasters, and food insecurity. They need to implement effective financial support measures, including debt relief. In our view, Now is the high time to seriously consider this important item. Ladies and gentlemen, today climate change-related issues in various countries around the world, including Tajikistan, pose serious obstacles towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Our country, with 93% of its land covered by mountains, is deeply concerned of an adverse effect of this situation. Changes in the hydrological cycle, a series of floods and droughts, and severe dust storms over the past decades have had a direct impact on Tajikistan's water and energy resources and food security. Every year we suffer tremendous material and financial losses due to water-related natural disasters. Regrettably, these phenomena often result in loss of life and the destruction of vital infrastructure. The impacts of climate change and rising temperatures have led to accelerated melting of glaciers and the deterioration of marine and ocean ecosystems. I would like to recall that Tajikistan hosted the high-level International Conference on Glaciers Preservation this summer in Dushanbe. This meeting brought the international community together to intensely deliberate on issues related to the cryosphere. It is worth noting that of Tajikistan's 14,000 glaciers, which are one of the region's main sources of drinking water, more than 1,300 have completely melted, and the rate of melting of these ices is accelerating. This is even though Tajikistan's glaciers and other water sources account for up to 60% of St. Asia's water resources. We must not remain indifferent to the matter of addressing issues related to the source of human life, water. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, Tajikistan plays a proactive role in water diplomacy. Our country is taking practical steps in cooperation with its international partners as a part of its latest initiative, the International Decade for Action Water for Sustainable Development 2018-2028. I call on member states and stakeholders to actively participate in the next event within the Dushanbe water process, the high-level international conference which will be held in Tajikistan next year. This event will undoubtedly give a new impetus to our continued joint efforts within the framework of the Water Action Agenda. We are confident that it will also serve as a solid foundation for preparations for the 2028 United Nations Water Conference in Dushanbe. Madam President, strong institutions and legal literacy are the ground of a just and stable society. Today, the international community is witnessing disrespect for and violation of international law, which is the foundation of order, peace, and stability throughout the world. We emphasize the need for strict adherence to international law and the resolution of all disputes and disagreements within the framework of the law. Being deeply aware of this reality, Tajikistan proposes that the United Nations General Assembly considers proclaiming an International Year of Legal Literacy. We call on all member states to join this initiative and strengthen the global culture of transparency and justice. Ladies and gentlemen, the rapid adoption of digital technologies and the effective use of artificial intelligence can noticeably contribute to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. I would like to extend my profound gratitude to all member states for their unwavering support of Tajikistan's proposal to adopt a special resolution entitled "The Role of Artificial Intelligence in Creating New Opportunities for Sustainable Development in Central Asia." I'm confident that the resolution adopted by the General Assembly on July 25th of this year will serve as a key instrument for the safe and equitable use of artificial intelligence in our region. We, in this context, consider the establishment of a regional Center for Artificial Intelligence in Dushanbe to be favorable. This center would undoubtedly facilitate an implementation of joint initiatives and projects among Central Asian countries in the field of artificial intelligence. It is worth noting that, along with the improvement of digital technologies, the number of new security threats, particularly cybercrime, is also growing. We therefore emphasize that cybersecurity must be an important component of collective security. It is evident that, along with cybercrime, terrorism, extremism, illegal weapons smuggling, drug trafficking, and other forms of transnational organized crime continue to pose a serious threat to the global security. Tajikistan supports the further expansion of international cooperation on global security within the framework of the Dushanbe counter-terrorism process. We are determined and willing to establish constructive interaction within this process with international organizations and the UN member states to even more enhance efforts to counter the aforementioned threats and security risks. We believe that relevant UN agencies, in particular the Office of Counterterrorism, can make an effective contribution to the comprehensive implementation of global counterterrorism strategies and programs and strengthen their support to all member states in this area. Distinguished participants, Tajikistan gives full support of the resolution of all disputes and conflicts through political and diplomatic means. We must redouble our efforts to enduring, lasting, and comprehensive peace based on international law. A year ago, from this podium, I proposed considering a special United Nations resolution proclaiming a decade of promotion of peace for future generations. A year later, the adoption of such a resolution has become even more pressing. In today's complex and volatile world, this initiative will create conditions for international cooperation to achieve lasting peace. I call on all UN member states to support this proposal for the sake of our current stability and a better and prosperous life for the generations to come. Ladies and gentlemen, we emphasize our principled, invariable position on the Palestinian issue. We believe that lasting peace in the Middle East is possible only through the implementation of the United Nations resolutions and the principle of the two-state solution. In this regard, we recall the need to resolve this issue exclusively through negotiations and diplomatic means in accordance with the international law, particularly the Charter of the United Nations. We call for a lasting ceasefire in Gaza and access to humanitarian aid. Tajikistan also supports peace and stability, overall security and socio-economic development in neighboring Afghanistan. We are ready to render our full assistance in these processes and in this regard call on the international community to provide humanitarian assistance, especially to regions affected by drought and recent severe earthquakes. Distinguished participants, Tajikistan supports the comprehensive reform of the United Nations system within the framework of the UN80 initiative, UN 2.0 and the UN Secretary-General's vision for a modernized United Nations. At the same time, we welcome the Pact for the Future as an important collective initiative to promote peace and sustainable development. These initiatives embody the shared aspirations and will of the international community to respond to modern threats and challenges and build a solid foundation for future generations. We reiterate the need to strengthen the key and coordinating role of the United Nations in ensuring inclusive peace and security. Only with trust, cooperation and unwavering determination we can build a just, peaceful and sustainable future for all humanity. Tajikistan stands ready to cooperate with partner countries and all United Nations member states in achieving these noble goals and addressing other pressing issues on the global agenda. I thank you for your attention.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Tajikistan. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Joseph Aoun, President of the Lebanese Republic. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Madam President, Mr. Secretary General, fellow colleagues, heads of state and delegation, I stand before you today to talk about peace, development, and human rights. At a time when some of my fellow citizens are facing death, parts of my country are under occupation, and while my homeland and my people live in uncertainty. This situation takes me back some 77 years ago to the drafting committee of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. During one of the debates, the late, great Eleanor Roosevelt stepped in to support one member's opinion so that he is not left alone, as she said to those in attendance. The dissenting member respectfully responded, "Honorable lady, my concern is not to side with the majority or the minority, but to align with the truth. The author of these words was no other than Charles Malik, the Lebanese philosopher who worked alongside other great minds of the time to give humanity this eternal declaration. He was also granted the honor of presiding over this august assembly from 1958 to 1959 to represent my country, Lebanon. Madam President, Mr. Secretary General, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I recall this incident today, first, to express my profound sense of pride and my heightened sense of responsibility as I stand before you today for the first time in my capacity as President of Lebanon on the 80th anniversary of this great organization. Second, because our session focuses on examining the inherent relationship between three human virtues: peace, development, and human rights, and between these three virtues and my country, Lebanon. The Lebanese experience, alongside lessons from our region and the world, have shown that there can be no development without peace, for growth cannot take place within chaos, and prosperity cannot be achieved amid conflicts and wars. Peace is the only foundation for development. Experience has taught us that just as there is no development without peace, there can be no peace without justice, and no justice without human rights, particularly the right to live in dignity. Without dignity, peace becomes an illusion, and the only growth will be in poverty, underdevelopment, violence, and bloodshed. Since the establishment of this great organization, its charter stipulated the need to save